Getting into the world of psychedelics is a true opening of Pandora's box. It's been the most fascinating journey of ideas and experiences that go beyond my imagination. Yet, the imagination seems to be the medium through which these transmissions come from the psychedelic experience. This video is a list of the most interesting aspects of consciousness that come up in the psychedelic experience. Hey y'all, welcome to Find the Others. My name's Tyler, and I created this YouTube channel because I'm very passionate about ideas like the ones we're talking about now. I find it all so strange and fascinating, and the goal behind the channel is to find other like-minded psychonauts who are interested in sharing and discussing these ideas and concepts that come up during trips, or as Terence McKenna would call it, creating maps of hyperspace. Number one on my list is entities. Encounters with some sort of intelligent being are often reported during psychedelic experiences. They're often described as aliens, tricksters, jesters, elves, or self-dribbling jeweled basketballs. These type of experiences can happen on a range of different psychedelic compounds, but you hear about it most with DMT, mushrooms, and ayahuasca. These entities are helpful or even spiritual in probably 90% of encounters. You very rarely hear about people describing them as malicious, but it does happen. Often these entities have something to show you, and I've even heard a lot of stories about them performing some kind of spiritual surgery on you, where they're unclogging negative energy that's stored in your body, or retuning your chakras and things like that. Or they show you something about your life or share some kind of words of wisdom. I've heard stories from friends of mine that have done DMT, and one of them was saying that he had a vision of him chilling with some aliens and they were smoking something and getting high. And I had another friend whose trip report is on my channel, and she described the elves as showing her kind of mocking the human lifestyle of eat, sleep, work, repeat, and they kind of put on a little show for her, kind of mocking our robotic lifestyle. So there's many possible explanations to what these entities are. People that lean towards a more academic and rational and materialist reductionist view say that these are parts of our own mind, of our own psyche, that are taking on an autonomy. So they seem like they're separate and outside of us, but really what we're seeing is a part of our own mind being represented as something external, and our ego is the one interacting with these other parts of the mind, similar to Carl Jung's idea of archetypes within us. The other view, which is often how it feels, is that these are actually some sort of beings that are outside of us. They either are some kind of aliens or interdimensional beings, or they could be human souls from the afterlife. There's a lot of different theories. Terence McKenna himself came up with 3 or 4 different theories on what these elves or these entities could be. Number 2, the centrality of love. This is one of the universal transmissions from the psychedelic experience. And love is at the core of mystical experiences. It seems that love is somehow not just a nice feeling and something that helps humans create babies and live in harmony, but love is somehow ingrained into the fabric of reality, and it's at the core of existence in some even more profound way than we can even understand, and in a way is the real purpose of existence. In my own experience, I saw and felt this love central to the universe, and I described it as the love glue that holds together the universe. It can even affect the non-romantic people among us. There was the episode of Hamilton's Pharmacopoeia where he smoked the toad DMT, and you just see Hamilton lying on his back during his trip, and he's just saying, love, love, love. And he's not really that type of guy. And after the experience, he said, oh, now I understand what people mean when they say they're putting love into the ingredients of these cookies. Whereas before, he just kind of wrote stuff like that off as being silly and irrational, but he could see now that love was something central to our lives. And you can see this message of love reflected in 1960s psychedelic counterculture. You got All You Need Is Love. All you need is love. Make love, not war. So this seems to be a very universal thing that people realize when they are in a deep psychedelic experience. Number 3, the collective unconscious. This is an idea from Carl Jung, and it's basically the idea that we have within us a reservoir of images, archetypes, and even memories that we inherit just by being human. It's something that all of us have, and these archetypes and images can appear in dreams or in other ways. In my trips, I've seen things like the chakras, alchemy, Rosicrucianism, things related to the occult, and I had no previous knowledge of these type of things. So the strongest explanation that I've come across to explain why I would receive these very specific types of images is that they came from the collective unconscious. And other people have these experiences. It wasn't just me. Shortly after my psychedelic awakening, I had these archetypal images pouring out of my unconscious, and I was starting to have dreams of the anima, which in archetypal terms is the feminine component of a man and also the source of their creativity and soul. Number 4, the subtle body. Without getting too deep into the definitions, the subtle body can be described as something that's not quite physical, not quite spiritual, but somewhere in between. This is sometimes called the light body or the astral body. Chakras are part of the subtle body system. There are many different systems, and I'm not saying one is more true than the other, but in my experience, I saw and felt the chakras, so that's kind of my operating mode. And chakras are often made fun of because of the way that they're portrayed by New Agers. The joke that you hear is, you just need to align your chakras, bro. And I get why it sounds so silly, but I'm convinced that they are in some way real, maybe in a way that we don't understand. In my LSD breakthrough experience, I experienced a Kundalini energy rising up my spine and stopping along the way in each of the chakra centers, and past that I still had more experiences of feeling energy in the chakras. Even then, because of how silly it sounded from other people talking about the chakras, I even started to doubt myself. But I had more and more experiences that made it to where I just couldn't deny it anymore, that there's really something going on here. I thought I might be crazy until I saw the artwork of Alex Grey, where in a lot of his paintings he depicts these chakra centers and the energy flow and the subtle body in a myriad of different ways. The third eye is one of these chakras, and after my psychedelic experience where I had my Kundalini awakening, I really felt like my third eye had been opened, and I started to receive visions in altered states, and they were extremely vivid and meaningful. And this kind of happened after this initial opening. And these visions have informed my life and creativity. It's a mystery why psychedelics might invoke this kind of thing. It's possible that they're clearing the energy of these systems or supercharging them somehow. Because there are yogis who practice Kundalini for years and years and years before they have these type of experiences, but LSD can make it happen like that. And you don't necessarily need psychedelics for a spontaneous Kundalini awakening, but it's one of the fastest ways to make it happen. Number 5, divine languages. You hear many reports about people seeing some kind of mystical language. They describe it as some sort of alien language that they don't understand. It can take many different forms, but you often hear it talked about like it's some kind of glyph or text or some kind of tile or some sort of floating imagery. Alison Gray has depicted what she calls the secret language in her artwork, showing us what she experienced. I have experienced this on the same acid trip I was just talking about, where I had the Kundalini experience, and I saw a divine language. This language was also the love glue holding together the universe that I was talking about. What it looked like to me was like a neon green Christmas tree, probably about 3 feet tall, and it was a mixture between Sanskrit, Hebrew, Arabic, and it looked like it was mathematical and geometric at the same time, but it was 3D and floating in front of you, and it was also the love glue holding together the universe. Duncan Trussell was actually the first other person that I heard describe something similar to what I saw, and he was also on LSD.
I remember going into my friend's shitty high school car and like sitting and like pulling the seat back and looking at the ceiling.
Wow.
And I'm looking at the ceiling and it's fucking hieroglyphics or some kind of like ancient writing. You know, I don't even think I knew what Sanskrit was at the time, but I'd probably be like, oh, I'm seeing Sanskrit, some kind of runes or glyphs all over my friend's car that's just kind of breathing and warping, and it's just beautiful.
The other instance where I heard someone describe something similar was from Terence McKenna when he was on LSD and he smoked DMT. He described an elf language that was flying everywhere through his room, and he also compared it to Sanskrit and Hebrew.
There were these rotating geometric things in the room, hanging in the air, and it was like moving in this jerky motion. This thing was going click, 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 and it was faceted. And every time it would make this large metallic click, these plastic triangle-shaped, brightly colored chips or something, like little pieces of floor tile or something, would fly across the room. And each one of them had a letter on it in an alien language, sort of like Hebrew or Sanskrit. And it was just, there were several of these machines, and these things were ricocheting off the walls, and I had an elf hanging off each hand, and I was turning around, and I was just saying, holy shit.
Could it be that we're seeing some sort of divine language? Or maybe we're seeing something in the inner workings of our brain that's kind of language before it comes out of us. It's kind of the precursor to all language. If so, our actual language is an extreme downgrade from whatever this is. This is slightly related to the divine language, but Terence McKenna talks about glossolalia, or speaking in tongues. And whenever you do that, it can alter the visuals of whatever you're seeing. One time I listened to Terence McKenna speaking in tongues while I was tripping on mushrooms, and it painted this picture for me. It was like his sounds and his words were an etch-a-sketch, and every new syllable and vowel was a new coordinate in space-time to paint this picture in front of me. And I actually have a friend who's in the Find the Others Discord who verified this. He tried the same experiment whenever I told him about the story, and he saw some even crazier stuff. He saw this floating elf language on these tiles that were rotating, and there was like a big circle of tiles that was rotating, and they were each individually rotating. It sounds crazy, so something is going on here that has to do with language. Number 6, telepathy. People report being able to read each other's minds while they're both in the psychedelic headspace without having to use words. There are plenty of stories of people having these type of experiences where there's a type of shared synchronicity that occurs and two minds become one for a brief moment. My friend's DMT trip report on my channel has an experience like this with her sister. I haven't experienced this personally too much, but during one of my LSD trips, I did feel like I was understanding my friend's gestures and intentions in a very, very intensely intuitive way, to where I understood a lot even though he wasn't saying anything. It was just like his intention and gestures were enough for me to understand this greater meaning behind whatever was in his mind. It's really hard to explain, but I'm sure some of you have had experiences similar to that. Have any of you had this kind of experience? In one of my podcast episodes, my friend KSM talked about having this telepathic connection with a dog. And this is actually a common thing that I've been hearing a lot more lately, is people having these experiences of telepathic connection and some kind of deeper intuitive understanding between them and their pet friends. Number 7, synesthesia in music. One of the first things people associate with psychedelics is the crossing of the senses. I have a memory of someone I went to high school with, and this was before I had taken any acid, and he was talking about his LSD trip, and he was saying like, yeah man, you know, you can just hear the grass growing, you know what I'm saying? And I didn't know what that meant at the time, but that seemed like a pretty good way to get across the sensation of synesthesia. The crossing of the senses can take many forms since you have 5 different senses, but to me the most powerful is the effect that listening music can have on your visuals. And when the music is hitting just right and it's like taking over you, it feels like it's creating sensations in all of your senses. Like you can hear, taste, feel, and smell the music all at the same time. Music affects the closed-eyed visuals. Even though you don't need music necessarily to have closed-eyed visuals, they can have a very powerful effect and modulate what you're seeing, just like the Icaros, which are the traditional songs that shamans sing during ayahuasca ceremonies. They have purposely engineered these songs to modulate your vision and what you see, and it can facilitate the healing. This is one of the most interesting subjects in the world to me, where psychedelics and music meet. It's the reason that I started this YouTube channel and also dedicated my life to music. I remember a different kind of crossing of the senses, but it really was different. It didn't involve taste, but it did involve hunger. I was having this Kundalini awakening, right? And I felt like this energy, whatever was bubbling up inside of me, that I had to express it. And a lot of this energy rising started in my core chakra, which is your center of willpower and drive. And it's also where you feel hunger, and hunger is one of the most motivating things that human beings have in our lives. I felt this mixture of wanting to create and to express this beauty and my primal physical need for food. So what I'm saying is it felt like it was as necessary to create and express myself as it was to eat and survive. And it felt like those things were mixing, and my will to survive in a very primal sense was now the same thing as my will to create. Number 8, past lives. I've heard some really wild stories of people on DMT who experience either part of an alternate life or an entire lifetime as either another person or some kind of other being in another galaxy or dimension. Or sometimes it can reveal to you about previous incarnations. Like my friend who, during her mushroom trip, was shown that in all of her past lives that those people had committed suicide, and she was the one that was finally going to restore the karmic balance and end the cycle. And the idea of living an alternate life as an alien while you're on DMT, that's just super interesting. And if that were true, what does that mean? It could mean that we're connected in some sort of web of souls that goes across the universe. I haven't personally experienced anything with past lives on psychedelics, but I've always felt a particular resonance to the aesthetics of certain time periods and places. One of them is feudal Japan, and the other is being an indigenous person using peyote. I've always felt this weird resonance with those things, and also being someone alive in the 1960s during the psychedelic counterculture. I don't have any solid conviction that these are my past lives, but I always felt like I resonated with these very particular times and places, and that if I did have past lives, these would be where they are. Number 9, intentionality. Set and setting are keys to a successful trip, and part of the set are the intentions that you set. Whatever you go into a trip wanting to work on, the trip will almost always deliver, even if sometimes it's in a unexpected and even uncomfortable way. It will show you what you need to see. Writing down your intentions or meditating on them is a good way to do this before your trip. In my experience, like in my heroic dose mushroom video, I went into the trip wanting to connect to my ancestors, and that's certainly what I got. I opened an entire new can of worms having to do with alchemy and Rosicrucianism, and I think my ancestors may have been involved in all of this stuff, and I'm only beginning to unravel what all of this could mean. The mushroom showed me that art is the best way to perceive our ancestors. In my LSD in the Forest trip report video that I did with my friend, she talked about when she was in the psychedelic headspace, she felt as if her Mayan ancestors were watching over her and supporting her, and it was resonating with her ancestors' use of psychedelics. And even if you don't have a clear intention set, sometimes the psychedelics can show you what you need, whether you're ready or not. This can be a good or bad thing. All psychedelics seem to do this more or less, but I noticed that ayahuasca seems almost surgical with how specific it gets in healing specific issues. Number 10, the mystical experience. Famously, one of the hardest things to define, psychedelics sometimes produce full-blown mystical experiences. And mystical experience is the basis of all religions. This is what made humans spiritual. William James helped to describe it about 100 years ago, and he described some of their qualities, so I'm going to read some of those to you. Ineffability. No adequate report of its contents can be given in words. Its quality must be directly experienced. It cannot be imparted or transferred to others. Mystical states are more like states of feeling than like states of intellect. No one can make clear to another who has never had a certain feeling in what the quality or worth of it consists. So it's, in simple and modern terms, you can't explain it to somebody who's never experienced it. You have to feel it for yourself. But I like this model of spirituality where you are the direct contact with the divine. There's no middleman, priest, or church that is the arbiter or the guardian of this divinity. You can directly experience it through mystical experiences. Another quality, he says, noetic quality. Although so similar to states of feeling, mystical states seem to those who experience them to also be states of knowledge. They are states of insight into depths of truth unplumbed by the discursive intellect. They are illuminations, revelations, full of significance and importance, all inarticulate though they remain, and as a rule they carry with them a curious sense of authority for after time. Again, in simple modern terms, you feel like you gain some kind of knowledge that is objectively true, and this lasts with you after your experience. These are a couple more qualities. Transiency. Mystical states cannot be sustained for long. That's true. I've probably only had 2 in my entire life. Passivity. The mystic feels as if his own will were in abeyance, and indeed sometimes as if he were grasped and held by a superior power. That is definitely true. There's a certain point where it feels like you're being shown something by something higher than you. It's like a little movie or something. In mysticism's favor is James' observation that mystical experiences across diverse traditions tend to point towards the same kind of truth. That is, the existence of a greater, incomprehensible reality beyond human experience. The knowledge imparted by mystical experience is, on the whole, optimistic, and pantheistic. This resonates with my own experience, which ticks all of those boxes. I felt continuous with the whole of the cosmos. I felt as huge as the galaxies and as old as time. I felt that the entire universe was somehow conscious, and central to everything was love. This is what kind of led me to the idea of pantheism, because as a teenager I had given up on the idea of God as a separate man in the sky, and now it was being replaced with an ineffable God-goddess that was also the whole universe and also me. This was dissolving boundaries between me and everything else, and so I could see myself as connected to nature and to other human beings. And I definitely think this helped increase my empathy and my ability to see in other people's perspective. This experience changed my life completely, and it's the reason that I'm so passionate about psychedelics and the experiences that they invoke. So that is my 10 aspects of the psychedelic experience. I wanted to add a few more just as honorable mentions, and maybe I'll just make another video about those later on. The honorable mentions are synchronicity, premonitions, boundary dissolution, death experience, integration, and ego death. Yeah, I should probably just make a part 2. This video is going to be part of a playlist that I have called Lists and Comparisons, so check that out if you want to see more videos like this one. Of course, if you're new and want to join our crew of psychonauts finding the others, please subscribe and hit the like button and comment, and that will all really help to support this channel. That's going to be it for this video, y'all. It was a lot of fun to make, and I can't think of a more interesting area of being human than the things that we just talked about. Life is so strange, and stranger than we can even imagine. And it's also infinitely more beautiful than we typically perceive in our everyday consciousness. I honestly don't like talking that much, but when it comes to talking about all of this, it feels as easy as breathing. Hope y'all enjoyed, and see you in the next video. Peace.